So first and foremost, thank you everyone for joining tonight, or whatever time it is where you are joining. I just want to make sure everyone is able to join. If you want to ask any questions, we're going to have a Q&A panel on the side here that I can keep track of. Let's see, full screen. Let me lower that. Okay. And so to get started, I want to first introduce Lori Metz, LCSW. I love those initials. She's a therapist, the podcast host of Life, and the author of I Dreamed of You, which I have right here. I love this book. It's really cute. And in case you don't know, it's the story of an egg donor baby. And right now, all of the proceeds on this book are going to this initiative to normalize third-party reproduction and advocate for third-party reproduction to be added to medical intake forms. So why don't we first start with Lori to tell us a little bit more about this initiative and this group of people you've brought together tonight to talk about donor conception and beyond.
Donor conception. Thank you, Jay. Well, first of all, Jay is here, who has been like so helpful and so instrumental in everything I've done with this. So huge thank you very much for all of this. The first webinar we did really focused on why we were doing this initiative. And it was made up of people who are involved more in the medical community and in different realms that way of working with people through third-party reproduction and adoption. Today, what I'm so excited about, actually I kind of have the chills, we're going to focus really on the donor-conceived person and the parent. And I so appreciate Haley staying up late because she's in the UK, and us being able to work around Lena's work schedule because she is like phenomenal. I got to chat with her and I love her and I don't even know her. And I don't say that lightly, although I do compliment a lot. People who really know me know I only compliment when I mean it. And so the two of them I think are instrumental, and as you hear their stories, you'll see why. And then Jennifer is here, who's a lawyer. Iran is here, who is the founder of Go Stork, which we'll hear about, and Patricia, who has spent years of her life dedicated and devoted to researching this topic. So I started this, I actually started chatting about it maybe 2 years ago at a legislative advocacy group with Resolve, and so excited that this is starting to come to fruition. And the purpose behind it is that through support groups that I run, women were talking about after they had their child, because many times with support groups that I run, the groups like to continue after the children are born. They said they didn't know whether or not they should tell the doctor that the child was donor conceived. And through further conversations, these donor conceived babies become donor conceived people and they're adults. And I started hearing stories about how they're not necessarily able to share the information at time of intake because they're just not asked or they didn't know. And this holds true for adoption also. So wanting to put this on the medical intake form is a way to open up the conversation and allow people to be represented in terms of their true family history. Because, you know, I always say this, and people who know me are probably sick of hearing it, nobody's an other, right? We all are conceived the same way. We're all conceived with an egg, sperm, and a uterus. That's what it takes. That's how we're all conceived. So our birth stories are the piece that's unique. And so I thank you all today very much for being here. And I am so excited for us to have this conversation to talk about really the implication of being the parent, being the person, and, you know, how we have this conversation openly and comfortably, and we talk about all the implications that go on. So thank you.
And thank you, Lori, too, because it's so funny when we had talked about this. Oh my God, how long ago did we talk about this?
First time we met?
I know, ages ago. And every time it came up with anyone that we spoke to, everyone's like, oh, why hasn't this been done ages ago? And so it's really exciting to see this initiative kind of take off and people to take interest in it. As an infertility advocate, my go-to sentence is, sometimes it's not if you'll be a parent, it's how. And it really depends on your own comfort level, your finances, your personal background, what you feel comfortable with exploring. But donor eggs, donor sperm, donor embryos are a potential how to the path of parenthood. And so this is something that I love discussing, because for me, once I knew I had more options as opposed to like either use Barry White and red wine or that's it, it just was a big comfort to me that I had all these different avenues to explore to have my family. So we have this incredible panel. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Lori, go ahead.
I'm sorry for interrupting you. What's so wonderful about this panel is because we also have a lawyer on the panel who can talk about the legal ramifications. We have a researcher on the panel who is a professor and has her doctorate, who's spent years researching it and understanding how to help people through the process and telling the story to the person. And we have somebody who's gone through his own journey, who started a company to help people understand where to even get started. So that's what's the beauty of this panel is tonight, I think, Jay.
Well, and I've actually followed almost everyone online. And so it's like the infertility Brady Bunch right now, where I get to actually talk to some of these people. Especially, I have to say, Lena Ridley, I've been following you for years. And you were one of the first people I know online that really talked about being a donor egg parent. And we're going to go through quickly and introduce everyone. And it's funny, I have introductions written out, but I think as per Lori's urging, it would be best to have you introduce yourself and talk about your journey and why this initiative interests you. So if you don't mind starting, Lena, I would love to throw it to you.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Nice to meet you guys. So I know online presence is so strange. I do a lot of these like webinars and fertility rallies and all that kind of stuff. And it is always so fun to like actually speak to each other in this way and at least see each other's faces and things like that and connect this way, a little bit more personal than just, back and forth DMs and stuff like that. So thank you very much, Lori, for including me and inviting me. We've had some great conversations over the last couple months since we've connected. So I appreciate you inviting me to this. And thank you to everyone who was flexible with their schedules. I work full time, so I have minimal time that I can do stuff like this. So if you had to stay up late or you had to get up early or you had to flex your schedule around, thank you very much. But so my name is Elena, Lena for short. I am a mom via donor egg, IVF. I pretty much went through all the normal, infertility stuff, the testing, the basic testing in the beginning, a couple IUIs, just the normal stuff that everybody kind of starts off with. Didn't think that we were going to have any trouble conceiving. We actually tried to conceive for 2 years before we actually sought help from a reproductive endocrinologist, because I had always had every test come back normal. No problems ovulating. Semen analysis for my husband was completely normal. Like everything on paper for me, even to this day, looks like I should be able to conceive naturally. And I never have. So we did IVF. We jumped into that pretty quickly after a couple failed IUIs. I actually have borderline polycystic ovaries, so I can make eggs like nobody's business. I actually, between 3 retrievals, had 60 eggs retrieved, but I had 9 of them transferred, and none of those actually resulted in a pregnancy. So although I can make eggs, they're not very good quality, unfortunately. And there's really no way to know that without having IVF and, having these eggs become fertilized. And I mean, there's no test really that they can test and say, okay, your eggs are crappy. I mean, if your levels are maybe somewhat out of range, but it's really kind of a long journey to get to the point of knowing that your eggs are not going to be good. So we did IVF for a couple of years, 3 fresh and 3 frozen transfers of 9 embryos and no pregnancies. And I have always been very open online. Some of you guys, we've been connected for a long time. And I had a blog back when blogs were like cool to do, before Instagram became super popular. Blogging is kind of not really the cool thing anymore. Instagram has kind of taken over. But so I started my blog and I was super open with it. I always have been. really, really open, like maybe almost sometimes TMI on some of the things. But what that did for me was actually put our donor into our lives. So because of my word vomit, I guess, of my infertility journey and all the things, and being very open about, you know, wanting to maybe try different things after so much failed IVF. A girl that I was connected with in the infertility community, she had a couple of struggles herself early on. She reached out and wanted to offer herself as a surrogate or an egg donor to us. She did end up having 2 children of her own at the time. And I was like completely shocked and just honored that someone that was a complete stranger to me would do something like that for me. I did not know her at all, never knew her through anything. She just randomly messaged me one day, and her and I kind of got to know each other. I kind of made sure I wasn't being like catfished or scammed or something. I mean, you just never know with social media. And we are great friends to this. I mean, we're like, she's one of my best friends now, but so her and I connected, and after about 3 weeks, I told my husband about her because I wanted to make sure everything was legit before I even said anything to him. And he was pretty much game for whatever I wanted to do throughout our whole journey, which was great. He was very supportive, and we decided to meet her in person. She lived in Georgia at the time, and we actually live in Illinois. So we flew down to see her, and you know, we didn't have any kids or anything yet, so we wanted to accommodate her as much as we could, being that she was willing to do this for us basically for free. You know, she kind of, I know gifted is, you know, saying it's a gift is not really a term that is, you know, always appropriate, but she did gift us, you know, her eggs. And now we have a daughter. So she gave us 10 eggs, and 6 of them were, 8 of them fertilized, 6 of them turned into blasts. We have 1 daughter. We've tried a couple other rounds for a sibling, and unfortunately we've had a couple miscarriages and a failed transfer, and we have 2 embryos left. They're just hanging out in the freezer waiting for us to make a decision. So that's the like shortest version of my story I can tell. I have a very long story. It started in 2011 and it took us until 2017 when my daughter was born. So we went through a lot in that period of time. So that's about as condensed as I can get it. I know it's kind of long. I probably talked longer than you wanted me to for an introduction, but that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
I was going to say, I'm sure it resonates with people, and you can follow her on social media. I mean, again, I think because I was blogging around the same time you were blogging, I think. But I feel like we've been online forever. Although this may be the first time we've ever talked, but you can find her online to hear the whole story. But she really is, to me, because I've been in the infertility world since 2009, she's definitely one of the initial people that was really transparent about her journey. And so many do kind of look to her Instagram and her blog and her experiences. So thank you for sharing all of that. Someone who's not on Instagram is Patricia. At least I don't think you are, because I tried stalking all of you. And as Lori said, she has been researching and studying the impact of donor conception for years. Can you give us a little bit of an introduction and tell us basically how you got into this field?
Sure. And first of all, I want to shout out and thank Lori for asking me to be here. I am really honored. This is something new for me. As you mentioned, I'm not on social media much, really not at all, but so delighted to be here. And especially, I want to say, speaking after you, Elena, because really your story and what you were saying, like my heart was like breaking. And this is really why I've worked so long in this, you know, with this population, with people just like you. So what I want to say is that yes, I'm Patricia Hirschberger, and I'm from the University of Illinois, Chicago, where I am an associate professor. But what I wanted to share with you folks, all of the panel and those of you listening in, is that I'm a nurse and a nurse practitioner, and when I became a nurse practitioner in the late 1990s, I actually took a position at the University of Chicago Fertility Clinic, where I was put in charge of coordinating the donor egg program. And I have to say, I just fell in love with all the patients. I was working with the donors, I was working with the recipient families, and I just fell in love with all of you. I thought, oh my gosh, they're working, all these individuals and couples are working so hard for a family. What can I do to help them? And I was trying to do as much education and counseling in my role as a nurse practitioner that I could. And I actually went back and talked with the physicians and I said, is there more about this counseling and education that I should be doing? I'm wondering if I'm doing it in the right way. And the physicians were like, Patricia, we love you, but there's not a lot in the field. We don't really have a lot of science. So that really launched my career into going back to school, receiving a PhD, and then following up on doing a postdoc actually in decision science at the University of Michigan, and also a short fellowship at the National Institutes of Health and Genetics. And before I joined the faculty here at the University of Illinois, Chicago. So what I also want to share too is, and I think why I've been asked to be here tonight, is that over the years and working with all of the different families, I remember specifically one of the studies I did a few years back, several of the donor egg actually recipient families were in my office, and they had children around middle school age, around 10 or so. And they said, Patricia, we're really wanting to tell our sons and our daughters about the conception, but we're really struggling with how to do it. Can't you help us? You've been here for so long, but can't you really help us with this telling these important conversations? So that really led me down a path to really help design a digital online tool that I now call the Tell tool, that my team and I think is a wonderful way to really help parents who would like more information or who are struggling with some of these initial telling conversations. We try to provide strategies, lots of different things that parents can do, and we also try to make it age appropriate. So for example, parents that have young children, we give them certain strategies. Parents whose children are around middle school age, we give them other strategies. And then parents who have children between age 13 to 16, we give them different strategies. So I'm really excited about that and happy to talk about it later. I also do want to say that part of my role, I am also recently the chair of the Nurses Professional Group for the American Society for Reproductive Medicine. So everything that I'm gleaning from this conversation tonight, I will be taking back to that group. We're actually meeting tomorrow and sharing with them. So I kind of have dual roles here. I'm a learner, and I'm also hoping to share what I know and help others that are listening. I hope I didn't take too long, but again, just so happy to be here and hope that I can contribute and help all of the families out there.
Thank you so much. And it's a very unique background. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. And I want to make sure I turn to Haley, who, bless her heart, what time is it there?
It is 11:20 in the evening. So
God, yes. Thank you so much for being here. Lori was so excited when she connected with you, and you have, talk about a unique background, a very specifically unique background. And so if you wouldn't mind sharing with all of us, you just have this incredible perspective that I know we're all going to truly be fascinated with and benefit from. So over to you.
well, thank you for having me firstly. So I'm Haley. Obviously I'm from the UK, you might be able to tell from my accent. So I'm a gay woman. I've been married to my wife now for nearly 11 years. And we have 2 beautiful children via sperm donor IVF. And we used an open ID donor in order to start a family. So in a bit of a twist of fate, I actually found out in 2015 that I'm also a donor conceived person myself. I knew growing up that I was an IVF baby. It was a celebrated story with my parents growing up, and I was one of the first IVF babies actually conceived at Bourne Hall Clinic, which is the first IVF clinic in the world back in the sort of early 80s when I was born under Patrick Steptoe. But sadly, what I didn't know, which was disclosed to me sadly in an argument in 2015, is that my parents had used anonymous sperm donation as part of the procedure. So as you can imagine, that was like completely life-changing to get that news so late in life. So in 2019, I decided really to just to do some more investigative work about my origins. I was really curious. So I took an ancestry DNA test, and through a lot of genealogy work, trying to work out matches on the commercial DNA site, I was able to locate who my biological father was. So the anonymous sperm donor that was used in the procedure. So yeah, so I'm in contact with him now. And I've got to know him now for the last 2 years, and it's been, like I say, completely life-changing. And I'm also in touch with some siblings that were also donor conceived. Yeah, so I'm completely new to social media in terms of Instagram. Laurie and I connected a few weeks back. I basically just decided to set up an account following an interview I did a few months ago now with Jenna Jaff about yeah, just being a donor conceived person and the recipient parent. So I've decided to start documenting my journey. And I'm keen to get into donor conception advocacy work, because since my discovery and more recently, since I've DNA tested, I've become aware of some real quite worrying things that are going on within the fertility industry around the world. And I think it's important that people start listening to donor conceived people's voices. So yeah, I'm doing a bit of advocacy work and just generally trying also to help people on their parenting journeys about how to talk to their donor conceived children, what me and my wife are doing, and yeah, just trying to share some experience that I've gone through. So that's me.
Well, for the record, as someone who's kind of social media obsessed, thank you so much for seriously joining the conversation, because I think you can all agree, I didn't lie, she has a very unique perspective, and there's so much that you can add to the conversation that I know will really resonate with people. So thank you for staying up. I don't know if I would be up at 11, so I'm glad you're awake, and you look fabulous for.
Well, the clocks went back. Your clocks went back. I think it would have been 10 o'clock, and then the clocks went back, and I was like,
in my next life, I'm coming back as a cat. I just want to sleep about like 10 hours a day.
I know.
Jennifer, I have known for a while, and she's a fierce advocate. She was in my advocacy group for New York for Resolve Advocacy Day. And her and I had an Instagram live that was so insightful. You have such a unique perspective as well, but again, from like a totally different way of things. So would you mind just giving us a brief overview of your background and why this topic means what it does to you?
Yes, of course. And thank you for that introduction. And thank you, Lori, for having me as part of this panel. I'm really excited to talk about these important issues, especially with such a diverse panel. I am an attorney. Thank you to our listeners who are tuning in and letting us talk about these things. Hopefully what we say does resonate with you and helps some people with their journeys. So I am a family formation attorney here in New York. I've been practicing law for almost 20 years, although I'm very new to this family formation field, having only been practicing for about a year in this area. And the reason that I now practice in this area is because I myself went through a journey to have my daughter, who is about to turn 4 on Saturday. I went through several miscarriages and IVF, like we've heard a lot of other folks talk about, and probably a lot of listeners out there have gone through as well. We found that I could produce eggs. However, I had a very uncooperative uterus. And so we had multiple failed transfers. I lost count if it was 4 or 5, 6. Every month I got ready, worked up the excitement, prepared to have a transfer, only to find out that my lining was not thickening, which was, of course, as you might imagine, quite disappointing. Luckily, I had a sister, and I realized that most people are not in this position, but I was very lucky that I had a sister who was following along with what was going on very closely, because not only were we close as sisters, but she's also a labor and delivery nurse here in New York. And so she had, for her last 15 years, been helping in the delivery of babies, high risk pregnancy. It's very different types of pregnancies. So she kind of read the writing on the wall before I even did. And she approached me at some point, and my husband as well, and said, you know, if you need us to carry, and us meaning her and her husband, because this is really a joint venture when people are married. She said, if you need us to carry a baby for you, we'd be happy to do it. And you can imagine I was a little surprised. I hadn't even had that conversation yet with my doctor, but lo and behold, that was the path that we needed to take. And so my sister was a wonderful altruistic surrogate. Unpaid surrogacy was the only avenue really available here in New York at that time. This was in 2017. And she offered to be a surrogate, and she carried my daughter, who, like I said, is turning 4 shortly. I'm not sure that my family building is done. Perhaps we'll pursue another surrogacy in the future, but at this point, we have our daughter and we're very happy to have her. But that sort of got me moving on, a thought process of, what, there are other people that, whether they're going through surrogacies or dealing with donations, dealing with parentage, gay and lesbian couples who need to have their parentage confirmed, there's more that I can do with my law license than what I'm already doing. And I decided that I was going to set down on this path of family formation and really helping people to become parents, helping people to have agreements, and helping people to have these open conversations. And so while I myself did not use donor egg or donor sperm or donor embryo, I represent people now who do that. And I represent people who are mostly in known donor relationships and having those agreements. And part of my commitment to myself and to this field is really to make sure that people are thinking about not just the short term, but the fact that donor conceived babies are going to be donor conceived adults. And so I think it's important for myself to make sure that I have those conversations with my clients right from the beginning, so that they start thinking about, well, what am I going to do when this child is 4, 8, 12, 22? How am I going to deal with this? How am I going to make this comfortable for them? And so I think, while I'm an agent of my clients and I have to do what they want in the end, certainly part of my job is to advise and counsel in addition. And so I think being part of this group, and certainly hearing from Elena and from Haley and other people who have gone through this and who are both donor conceived people or parents of donor conceived people, helps me to inform my clients and get better results for the community in the future. So that's why it's important to me to be part of this. So thank you, Lori, for including me.
Thank you.
This is so wonderful. Sorry. I was just thinking, it's the term I love is birth narrative. And it's clear that everyone really wants to create a healthy birth narrative that shows that just because something is different doesn't mean it's less than or less rewarding. And so I'm all excited. Sorry. Aran, I have known for a while, and he's so sick of me saying this, I'm sure, but Ghost Stork has, I swear to God, he's not paying me to say this, incredible technology. If you are going down a path looking at gestational carriers, egg donors, because it streamlines things completely. It just amazes me. Again, I've been doing this since 2009, and I have not seen technology like Ghost Stork, because it just takes this overwhelming journey sometimes and makes it so much simpler and just visually attractive to kind of compare your options in like one-stop shopping. I know we use that term a lot. But also Aran has his own family building journey, if you wouldn't mind talking about that. Sorry again to say the same thing about, I always talk about your technology, but it's really impressive to me. But yes, please go check out the site. But for now, let's talk about Aran. Go for it.
Thank you. First, I want to say thank you to Lori for inviting me to participate in this webinar. I'm overwhelmed with these amazing people here. I feel like I'm the new kid on the block, but you guys all have amazing, like, sad stories, but I'm like, for me, it's just like a different story. I will tell you guys in a second. But yeah, I'm a gay dad. This is my daughter that was born through surrogacy and egg donation. And I also have another, today she's 3 years old. That was like when she was 3 months. Today I have another daughter. She's 6 months old, also through surrogacy and egg donation. So my story started when I turned 40. I was a single gay dad, a single guy in New York, and I wanted to build my family through surrogacy. So for me, just like it was a different journey. It was more like I wanted to build it. I knew it's going to be through egg donation and surrogacy. So that's like when I turned 40, I was like, okay, I'm going to do it by myself. I'm single, I'm financially stable, I'm emotionally stable. I couldn't find a partner to do that. So I'm just going to do it by myself. And a day after my birthday, I started Googling. And that's how I got to know with the fertility world, with the egg donation, surrogacy, and all that stuff. And through my journey, I really understood how hard it is. No matter where you're coming from, once you start the fertility process, it's overwhelming, it's hard, it's stressful. There's so many ups and downs. I just didn't know anything about surrogacy or egg donation or IVF. I didn't know where to start, what to look for. None of my friends did that. None of my, like no one. I really started Googling what is surrogacy, and I found out that I need a surrogacy agency, and I need an egg donor, and I needed an IVF clinic. And I started like researching and understanding what's the important things I need to know when I'm choosing these people that's going to help me build my family. It took me weeks and months of research. I went to my company. I was working at BNY Mellon, and it was like, can you guys help me? Like anything? And they were like, what? So like there's no help, no support, nothing. I was all by myself. And because my background is technology, I was executive in technology companies for the last 25 years. And doing market research is part of my job. So I literally did a market research about fertility and egg donation and surrogacy. I took it very seriously and understanding how I need to choose these providers. So I started it by myself. 6 months after, I matched with my husband on Tinder. So it's funny, only when you stop looking, they come, right? And then I told him, like, listen, I'm like in the middle of the process. I'm going to have a child, take it or leave it. Like literally before we met, I told him I'm having a child. And he was like, yeah, for sure. I love it. Let's go. And he became my husband. That's the true story. But my journey, it was ups and downs because I really didn't know how to go about everything. So after weeks of research, a friend recommended me about a surrogacy agency and an IVF clinic because they did that with them. I just went with what they said. But the egg donation process was the hardest part for me because I had to look for, it's like online dating now, instead of guys, it's like girls, but you have to register to all these like databases that are out there. You have to provide them all the information about yourself. Sometimes they ask you money up front, and then you enter this database of a lot of egg donors that are wonderful. They're like angels that want to help us build our families. But the problem with that for me was that all these egg donor agencies don't have a lot of egg donors. They have 50 or 100 egg donors. And after you put your filters and what you're looking for, there's not a lot left to choose from. So that was a huge problem for me. And I had to go to many databases and egg donor agencies. I spent money, I chose an egg donor, and then she was disqualified. And I was tied to this egg donor agency. And it's just like overwhelming and a lot of information. There was lack of transparency. I didn't know how much it's going to cost me. No one is talking about cost in this industry. Like you really have to call them and ask them, what is the process? How much is going to cost me? They all send you these PDFs with like 20 pages of PDFs with a lot of fees and hidden fees, and like you
There's
don't really
usually like
understand.
this wide range, like anywhere
Yes,
from
huge
10,000 to
range.
200,000. Yeah,
Exactly. And
right.
you really don't understand like what's going on here. So started my journey. I found an egg donor. After 6 egg donor agencies, I found an egg donor. I had a surrogacy agency and an IVF clinic, and she was a anonymous egg donor. So we did FaceTime, but I didn't know who she is or where she lives, her name, and nothing about her. But I fell in love with her, and she fell in love with us. And we started the process. I already had an IVF clinic. So We did the egg retrieval, and I provided my sperm. We created the embryos. We did the genetic testings, and then by that time I had a surrogate ready, and she was also my angel. I found her through the agency, obviously, and we did a transfer. So before we did a transfer, we created 4 embryos, and only one of them survived after 5 days. So blasted, only one. Unfortunately, it was so stressful, very stressful. And I was like, I had only one chance. And we did it, and it was successful. And that's this little girl. We call her the survivor because she survived the 5 days, and it was a successful transfer. And then through that, after that, I was like, oh my God, there's so many issues in my journey, specifically at the beginning of the journey, which is such an important part to choose the people that are going to help you, that's going to support you through the next year and a half. And I was like, I'm coming from technology. I think that I know the problems, and I want to build a solution that's going to help other intended parents, patients, gays, straight, single, doesn't matter who you are, whoever, if you have infertility issues or not, and you just want to build your family through egg donation or surrogacy. Like I knew that a fertility marketplace will help them find all of them in one place. So I left my job in 2019, and I called my IVF clinic and my surrogacy agency, and I told them, what do you think about this idea? Like, I don't think there's a fertility marketplace. Like, I want to put all the egg donors in the world in one place. I want to put all the surrogacy agencies and the IVF clinics, and not just create a directory. I really wanted to create transparency to help intended parents to find the right information that they need for the providers that they're going to work with, including costs. So they told me, oh my God, it's amazing. Like, I don't think that it exists. I think no one's going to agree to put their cost online, but I think it's a great idea. So I started calling everyone, and they kind of like connected me word to mouth. And I convinced for the first time ever, all the surrogacy agencies and the egg donor agencies and the IVF clinic to put their services in Ghost Stork, including costs. Ghost Stork is the only place today that you can actually log in. You can subscribe for free as intended parent and see 10,000 egg donors, 10,000 egg donors from different agencies, all in one place. And it's free, and you'll see how much it's going to cost you. And we did the same with surrogacy agencies. We have surrogacy agencies. You'll see how much it's going to cost you to do surrogacy. And in a month and a half, we're launching the fertility clinic marketplace. So people can connect with fertility clinics, and we'll see how much IVF cycle is going to cost me, how much a guaranteed cycle is going to cost me. All these things, what's the success rates, what's the national, so all this information that they need, that's what I wanted to do, just to build a fertility marketplace, to aggregate data, to create transparency, and also to help them make informed decision. So we build tools like a comparison tool and sorting according to cost, according to success rate, according to matching time, whatever you want, whatever is important to you, you can choose. And then we build chat and a booking system. So you can talk with them directly in Ghost Stork.
What I was going to say that's amazing is listening to everyone talk, it seems like our fertility journeys or the fertility world has all changed our careers. Like literally all of us, and mine too. Once this touches your life, you kind of, I think you see maybe where places can be improved or where conversations need to happen. And I think that's the case for everyone here, which is really amazing. Lori, something I'm thinking is everyone here obviously is open about their family building journey. I mean, obviously they're on a webinar, they're on Facebook, you know, people are listening, and they have shared their birth narrative and how they got there. But you work with a lot of patients who don't necessarily want to be open about it, who are maybe not comfortable with it, who maybe have feelings about even telling their family or their friends. How do you feel this initiative will help normalize it in terms of even the medical community and just one another?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you that I have tears in my eyes as each and every one of you speak. So thank you so much for sharing your stories, honestly. And I know all of them, and I still have tears in my eyes. The interesting thing is, when I got to speak to Selena and Haley, and we spoke about telling people and telling children, and Patricia and her tell study, I'm sorry, I was thinking story. It's fascinating to me because I work with people who are still apprehensive. And the apprehension comes from their story, not from the story of the person who they're going to be giving birth to. And I will tell you, recently, I have gotten a little backlash from social media about the word normalize. And so I would like to address that for a minute. And please jump in, please, especially, moms, jump in, please. The reason why the word normalize was selected, and I can't say I'm a huge fan of it. I kind of like the word comfortable, but I do agree with the word normalize in many ways, because we want everybody to feel as if they belong. And if we cannot open up this conversation, and we cannot allow people to at least feel comfortable in a physician's office while an intake is being taken, to have a place to put your birth story, your birth narrative, well, then that is not normal to me. We all need and we deserve to be able to have a place to put information. And so when I work with people and they're not comfortable with their birth, with the birth story of their intended child, what I try and do is I have them write a story while they are expecting. So if they're carrying a donor conceived child, then that is the point to start to write the story. If they're using a surrogate or going for adoption, the story can be written at that point in time, because you're expecting whether you're carrying a child or not. And that story is to help you through your journey in your process. And that's actually how I wrote my book. I think I've shared with all of you, through trying to have my support groups and my individual people I work with write their own story. So I think, and please jump in at any time, I think that the issues around not telling your child right away, I think 10 years ago, the medical community was saying, don't tell, there's no need to. And I think today, that has switched to, of course, we should tell people, but we need to be comfortable in telling them. And it's, how do you do that? I don't know. Do you agree with that? Just, yeah.
Yeah, can I just step in? I was just going to say,
I was actually going to throw it over to you, Haley, because I think you're the best person to speak on this. Yes, please.
I think, my parents, if we go back to my story when it all began, they were told by the medical professionals to keep it a secret. That was the advice back in the 70s and 80s, and even in the 90s, and obviously still happens today, where parents decide for whatever reason to not tell the truth of their child's conception story. And
interesting. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but it's so interesting that you said to tell the truth.
Well, it is. It's otherwise, whether it's via omission or lies. I mean, I've talked about the situation with my parents in my Instagram post, but I don't like using the word liar in the same sentence as my parents, because I love them and they did the best with the information that they had. But essentially, when it comes down to the facts, that's what happened. And finding out so late in life, I mean, I think the literature now is that anything later than, if you can remember being told, it's too late. So, that I would say personally, start the discussions early with your child. And like you say, Laurie, it's important that the parent feels comfortable as well, because if the parent's not comfortable, the topic isn't discussed at home, the child will pick up on that. And even me as an adult now that it's all out in the open with my parents, they still struggle terribly to talk about anything to do with what's happened, donor conception, the situation, with my biological father, and it's still ongoing. So I think it's really important, like you say, to get comfortable right at the start and to kind of set the trend as you want to continue, because it's going to benefit our donor conceived children.
And does anyone have thoughts, because this is a big question, how do you approach talking to your children about being donor conceived? How, or in the case of, Jennifer, that you work with a gestational carrier, how, and this is for anyone on the panel, how have you talked to your child and how have you talked to people in your family about pursuing donor conception?
For us, we actually, well, again, me, just my personality, I've been very open with it from the beginning. I never was quiet about donor conception. So between all my social media and everything, pretty much everyone that's, any of my Facebook friends or, family, everyone kind of knows. But as far as telling our daughter, Georgia, we started telling her about when she was about 2 years old. So we know our donor, and we've spent time with them, and Georgia has spent time with them. So we took a bunch of photos and I put them in a book, kind of like a chat book, or, you make your own photo book. And I just hand wrote her story. And we just read that to her. We started reading it to her when she was 2. She had no idea, she had no clue, what we were talking about, and we just continue to kind of do that. We go through that book, a few times a month. And, we went on vacation with our donor and her family this past summer. We went to Florida and we got to spend a week with them. We stayed in a house. She refers to her donor siblings as her brother and sisters, which is fine with me, especially right now. She's only 4. So, we don't want to make it too complex or complicated. So right now we're just kind of letting her take the lead from from however she's taking it in from us. We're just kind of going with it. Like we're fine that she calls them her brother and her sisters, because they are her brother and her sister. So, we're totally fine with that. And, for me, I never really had to experience, because I was so open with it from the beginning. Like all my family and everything was very like understanding and accepting. And I never got like any, not to my face, at least, maybe behind my back, I don't know, but I never got any, questions or like, why are you doing this? But I've encountered a lot of people on social media, especially people from other cultures, where this type of thing is like highly, highly frowned upon, and not really as acceptable, of people that want to do it, but like their mothers or their grandmothers or their aunts, they won't understand and they can't explain it, and they are so fearful to even talk about it. And it's so important to have that dialogue with your donor conceived person. But you also, I also try to tell people you have to consider dialogue with your family, because, if you're going to tell your donor conceived child that they're donor conceived, they're going to turn around and go tell their grandma at some point. How 4-year-olds are, they never stop talking, and kids are brutally honest. So, the child is clearly, the most important piece of giving that information to, but I think it's really important to get that dialogue going with as many people as you can. And if a family member is hesitant or doesn't understand, you got to educate. You got to advocate for yourself. You got to educate, and you just have to, teach people that this is super, it's so much more common than people realize. And it's so important to tell from as early as we possibly can, and not the secrets of the, the 80s and the 90s and all that. Don't tell them and all that, because it's, from everything that I've learned from some donor conceived groups that I'm in, is, every donor conceived person that I know is like, please just start talking about it as soon as you absolutely can. And I could not agree more, and you have to find a way to go about doing it. So
I wanna say, also on my journey, and Elena, I cannot agree with you more. From my point of view, everyone knew I'm gay, so everyone knew it's donor conception. But my daughter, I told her from day one, literally all the time. I tell her, you don't have a mom, you have 2 dads, Abba and a daddy. And if someone at daycare talks to her about it, and she comes back home and she mentioned the word mom, I said, hey, you have Abba, because I'm Israeli, Abba, and you have a daddy, and you have someone that provided her egg. So we read her books. Actually, I read her a lot of books, just like Lori's book. we got so many books about egg donations and surrogacy. And since she was like 1 year old, like just like I read her any other books, I just read her these books about the egg donation and stuff like that. So it was always in her mind that she has two dads and she was not born like in a regular conception. She had a donor and she was helping us, another woman that was helping us to bring her to the world. And to add on top of that, my donor contacted me because she was anonymous. Just before the Ariel was born, she was like, Iran, she contacted me on Facebook and Instagram and said, Iran, I'm okay to be known. If she will ever want to talk to me or ask about me, I'm okay with that. This is my phone number. We became friends on Facebook and Instagram. And I'm never going to be afraid about anything. I always going to tell my daughters about her donor and how they came to the world. And Go Stork, every person that registered to Go Stork is getting a welcome email from me, and I invite them to do a concierge calls. These concierge calls are 1 hour free calls that I help intended parents to not just connect to providers. I give them a lot of tips, how to save money, how to choose an egg donor or a surrogacy agency, things that I did not know, insurance, like all these things about even legal a little bit. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, but from what I know, I give them a lot of great tips. But I also tell them that never hide your journey from anyone, because you need to have a supporting system. When you're going through this journey, I know, I was a major in the Israeli army for 5 years, but having surrogacy was hands down the most difficult, emotional, stressful I've ever done in my life. And I keep telling them, talk about it. Talk about it with your friends, talk about it with your family, bring them all together because you're going to need that support. So tell the truth and tell that. When I was a little bit younger and I was gay, all my girlfriends that went through infertility were coming to me with their stories, but they were never talking about that between themselves. And I was like, oh, let's just, guys, just talk. We need to talk about that. And it's important. So that's me.
Patricia, when you counsel patients, does that come up? Like, do people say, oh, I'm nervous to share my journey, and do you handle that?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, I just want to thank everyone on the panel. We have such a great panel. We have donor conceived person, we have gay, lesbian, straight. So this is wonderful. But I just wanted to add a couple things. First of all, for parents out there who haven't told yet and who are struggling, know that that's typical. I mean, many parents are in that situation. So I don't let that be a barrier if you haven't started telling early. Yes, I agree that, telling early, even during pregnancy, just starting with those words while you're pregnant, we find that can be helpful. But for parents listening out there that haven't been able to initiate these conversations, and their children are anywhere from, say, 1 to 16 years old, there are strategies that parents can use, and we know some things that can kind of be helpful. For example, if your child, say 10 or 12 years old, you may want to do something that we have deemed called a lead in. So we have some strategies that can help parents kind of lean into these conversations. Also, I just want to add too that with my background in genetics, everything that's going on in medicine and genetics, what we're seeing is that it is really for the benefit of not only you as a parent, but your child, that they know about these origins. We also see in our data, there's a growing data from around the world, that the parent and child relationships are strengthened when these conversations take place. And I'd like to hear from Hales about her, her experience with that. But we are seeing that is the best health of you as a parent and your child, as well as that parent-child relationship, when parents are able to engage in these conversations, albeit you started in pregnancy, you started when your child's at 2 years old, you start it when they're 10, you start it when they're 13, you start it as soon as you're able to. And I welcome you to engage in the Tell tool that we have that's for free. Or if you need to, see counselors like Lori, if that's what you need. But just kind of peruse these avenues. Attending this webinar, I think, is a great first step. Also for parents that are struggling with that. And those of you who have told, getting your stories out there and encouraging, I think when parents hear that, they also find that helpful. So just a couple quick comments, and I'll let others go ahead and add to that. Thank you.
I just wanted to add that when it comes to, with surrogacy, it's a little bit different. And I recognize that my story is somewhat different because it's about how my daughter was carried. And that was, a blip in time, really, relatively speaking. She doesn't have to hold with her the fact that she was donor conceived, which if you're a donor conceived person, that's lifelong. That is who you are. And I understand that there is a difference there. But nevertheless, it is a birth story that is, different than her friends and different than other people. And so I completely agree with what has been said by everyone on this panel, that it's about teaching other people. And I think a barrier to people being open about this is the discomfort that we as the grown-ups in the situation feel. And specifically when it comes to surrogacy, and my situation in particular, I think that our initial feeling is that, okay, we attempted the normal way, and I hate the use of that word, but the traditional way, to get pregnant, and that didn't work. So then we found that our bodies were failing us. And when we find that, we start to feel like a failure. And I think coming to terms with that feeling is really the first step. Because if you start to regard your body as a failure, it's a problem, and that becomes a barrier. But if you start to accept the fact that, everyone cannot perform, their bodies cannot perform in the same way, that's becoming a little bit more aware of your flaws or of your differences. And if you start to internalize that, it makes it easier to tell your children. So in terms of how I've told my daughter, obviously she's 4, she doesn't know everything. She doesn't know how babies are born yet. So there's not much for us to really talk about, and I'm not ready to have that conversation. But she does know that she was never in my tummy. She knows she was in Aunt Alexis's tummy. And so she knows that. And the way that I've talked about it with my nieces, who are my sister's daughters, who are 9 and 6, who do know what went on and do know a little bit more, they understand. And we've talked about the fact that not everybody is good at everything. Everyone has things that they're good at and things that they're not good at. Their bodies are good at certain things, and other bodies are good at other things. Some people can run really fast. Some people can play baseball really well. My body was just not good at carrying a baby. But Aunt Alexis's body was very good at carrying babies. And so that's what she did. And so she helped our family in that way. And so I think that's an age appropriate way. But I had to get to the point where I could become comfortable with the fact that I had this, flaw of my body. And, I've become very open about it. Obviously, I would not be here otherwise. I would not have gone into the field that I'm in otherwise. But I think that is a first step. And I think that the grown-ups need to really become comfortable with their own story, which will be their child's story, in order to then have that conversation openly with the people around them and their children.
And Jennifer, I have to say something, please forgive me. It's not a flaw. It's a medical diagnosis. There's
Right.
nothing wrong with you. It's just a medical diagnosis, and we all get medical diagnoses in life. Unfortunately, this one comes a little earlier in life than most. So there's nothing wrong. If it's okay, can I just interrupt for a minute? As I'm listening to everybody's stories, there's a little bit of a distinction, isn't there, between what's perceived by support systems for the heterosexual community versus the non-heterosexual community. And so sometimes telling your community, your support system around you can be different. And sometimes that can add an extra layer of stress, because for a heterosexual couple, it's understood or unspoken that you're going to be able to deliver with that couple's sperm and egg, and that the female will carry. When you're going into a same-sex relationship, it's assumed that you will be using a donor on some point. And there is a distinction there. And sometimes I'm not saying that they're not both challenging in their own ways. They certainly are. So I am not discounting anything. But in some ways, that preconceived notion of society resonates. And that resonation, I think, is where the struggle comes from many parents. And so trying to be able to work through that is sometimes the hard part. I don't know if anybody agrees or disagrees, but I just wanted to put that out there.
In the context of the initiative, I would love to ask people, and I hope I phrased this well, because something that Lori has explained to me many times is if a doctor says to any of you, you know, was your child conceived through donor conception, that actually will not only, now I hate to use the word normalize, but create, I guess, maybe take that birth narrative and make it part of the conversation, maybe more than normalize, but also it could be more robust medical care for your child. So I guess the question is to anyone who wants to answer it, do you think it would be helpful if a doctor did ask this question at these pediatrician appointments? And how is it, maybe, how could they do it in a helpful way to make everyone feel comfortable? Lori, let me know if I kind of overviewed that very well, but.
No, you did great. Haley, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to ask Haley too.
I think
Haley, because I know we've had this conversation.
well, the tick box would be, I think, is a good idea. So it's on like a form, so it kind of takes that pressure away from the parents. So, you know, the doctors then or medical practitioners can obviously see it on the form, and I think it's fab because it means that can then be integrated as part of the consultation. And I think sometimes, you know, if that wasn't on there, the practitioner might make assumptions based on how the family was born. So things like medical history might be recorded incorrectly. If the parent's then a little bit reluctant to actually say, well, hang on a minute, we did use a donor, so my medical history or my partner's medical history is completely irrelevant. And like I say, we've discussed, Laurie, I've had instances where, due to the fact of being a late disclosure donor conceived person, I've had medical problems, and then things haven't been dealt with correctly because I've had the wrong medical history. And that's
I was going to ask you that, because also too, and I always share this, I've had health issues like later on in life that if I was an egg donor, I would want to then tell any child maybe conceived through my egg. So did you find out medical history after you were aware that you weren't genetically okay? Yeah,
so there was two occasions really on the flip side of the first was sadly I was involved in quite a nasty accident at work back in 2013, and I had a neurological injury, and then I started developing severe migraine and cluster migraine. I'll try and cut a very long story short, but I was then assessed by a neurologist, and there was actually a very strong medical history in my dad's family and my dad, so my raising father, and so that was documented on my medical file. And what ended up happening is that the neurologist in my report of my accident at work couldn't fully attribute my accident to the cause of my migraine because of the strong hereditary link potentially to my father's side. And then obviously I found out 2 years later that I was actually donor conceived. My dad's medical history was completely irrelevant. And I ended up then going back to the neurologist who actually was then able to, say, yeah, your accident at work, I am happy now to say that your migraine that you continue to suffer with and has had, a long lasting effect on your quality of life, can be attributed to the accident, which obviously has loads of other implications in terms of things like compensation and stuff. And then on the other side, when I actually found out who my biological father was, one of the first things he told me, his name, I call him Jonathan. I say biological father, but his name, I call him Jonathan. It's a bit easier. He has a very strong family history of atrial fibrillation, and he required 2 ablation surgeries. His father, so my paternal grandfather, needed surgery, and his brother, so my paternal uncle, and my cousin, they've all had ablation surgery for atrial fibrillation. And I was completely unaware. And I was having heart palpitations. You can probably guess where this is going. before I found out I was donor conceived, I'd been to my GP, which is my general practitioner, but because there was no medical history at the time of any heart complications, I was treated as, you know, I had the initial trace done. There was nothing picked up, thankfully, but that was it. But then when I found out I was donor conceived and went back with my accurate medical information, the next day I'm in the cardiologist's office within 2 weeks, having all the tests done and everything. And thankfully, nothing is shown up untoward, but I'm now on a watch list. So should I start getting palpitations or any other heart complaints again, I would be seen more rapidly. If I didn't know I was donor conceived and didn't have that accurate medical information from Jonathan, you know, I'd be none the wiser. So it's really, and just the sort of, I don't want to jump around too much, but one of the sort of things I'm aware of now with the twins, our children, is, you know, actually being able to have access to updated medical information for them, because obviously, you know, sperm and egg donors are vetted when, you know, they obviously provide the gametes, but I don't think the fertility industry is doing enough to keep those records updated should there be any medical issues, you know, further down the line. Yeah, so I think, you know, a lot more could be done there. And I get frustrated now as a parent, you know, now because, you know, now I know I'm donor conceived and I've experienced it firsthand, the problems that can cause. You know, I worry for our children, and, you know, the fact that it's almost like history is repeating itself really potentially. And I think clinics could be doing more with the donors to get more information.
And on that note, Patricia, do you think it would be helpful to the doctors to have that as part of their questions to ask?
Gosh, absolutely. The whole team, doctors, nurses, everyone that is trying to, you know, provide the best healthcare that you can. Thank you, Haley, for, you know, describing and explaining your history. I have talked to a lot of families that have very similar situations to what she mentioned. And this is part of the reason that, you know, I'm really encouraging parents to tell, and then really working with many individuals. In fact, tons of volunteers, you know, donor conceived individuals, experts, pediatric experts, psychologists like Lori. 55 of my students are, you know, voice actors. So really trying to find a way to help parents talk, you know, have these very important conversations. And then also, I really appreciate the work Lori and others are doing. Jennifer, I am so, you know, working hard. I have some initiatives going to really move this into the medical field. I agree that it should be on the medical record. I know it gets tricky. I've taken care of many parents that said they have not told anyone at all once they leave that fertility clinic, not shared with pediatrician, anyone else. So I think anything that we can do to really, you know, thinking hard about how we can help these parents, definitely working with other providers, I think would be a good start. And just to add quickly, I think the other piece that Hale's brought up is communicating between donor and recipients, all the new health information that comes both ways. Sometimes children are diagnosed with you know, rare conditions that the donor may want to know about. Oftentimes, you know, the donors are young, they don't know their full history, but as their life unfolds, things come up, and sharing that information both ways, I think is really important when you're thinking about the health of all these different individuals.
And Elena, I get the sense, when you have gone to the pediatrician, I can't imagine they've asked you, but do you volunteer this information saying actually she was donor conceived?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm totally game for, I think it's super important that it be on a document because, you know, there are so many people like that. It takes the pressure off the parent, but at the same time, and anyone that's gone through infertility can totally relate to this. You have to advocate for yourself a lot because, you know, fertility doctors are, you know, we all feel like we're, you know, we all feel like we're special and this is only affecting us, but fertility doctors see, you know, 20 people in the same situation all day long. So sometimes, you're just a patient to them, and they don't really always look at you as like an individualized person. So you really have to advocate sometimes and ask the questions and do some of your own research, and talk to other people in the community to get other ideas and make suggestions and change clinics. I mean, I went to like 4 different clinics. So I have just with my experience with that, I have always felt like you have to advocate for yourself. And then when you become a parent, you got to advocate for your kids too. And I think part of that, at least for me, was just right off the bat, explaining everything to them and being like, this is what it is, so that, that this is just part of her medical history that needs to be in her file, because it could potentially affect, a lot of things. So I just felt like right off the bat, and again, it's just part of me and my personality and like my willingness to share my story from the beginning without really any kind of like filter. And I just kind of do that with everything. So, but not everyone, a lot of people do not feel that way. A lot of parents are still struggling to tell their own child, let alone to tell a doctor. So I completely understand that that's not the case for everyone. And that's where I think that form will really come in handy, or that question on a form would really come in handy, because it just, you can just check the box and then the doctor knows and you don't have to say anything. But again, like I said, just my experience from the fertility side of it and having to advocate for myself, I just felt like personally, I just needed to let her doctor know. My midwives, when I was pregnant, I told my midwives right away. You go to that first appointment when you're like 9 or 10 weeks and they ask you all that family medical history. I'm not sure if that's the same everywhere, but for me, I had to go in and I just did like an hour-long appointment where they asked me all kinds of questions about my medical history, which was pretty much irrelevant to it was relevant to my pregnancy for me, but a lot of the things that they asked, weren't going to affect my daughter because she's not genetically related to me. So I just went off right off the bat, and I was like, this is what it is. And then, my midwives and I ended up having a C-section. So I had to have an OB deliver her. So then I had to tell her, so I kind of had to just keep reiterating that story to all the medical professionals throughout the whole journey. So yeah, I do think that having that on any kind of intake form from a pediatrician standpoint would be super helpful. But again, for me, the word vomit thing for me, I can't always contain myself. So, but yeah, it's important because it can change, like all this medical history, like in Haley's case, I mean, that could be a life-changing, piece of medical history that could, anything that's huge. So yes, I think it's super important. Definitely. Sorry, I have a cat in here too, just so you guys know. My cat is in here. He is like flying. There he goes. There's his tail. So
I have a cat as well. I relate. The cat wants to be part of the conversation in normalizing furry babies.
Yeah. He's just a year old, so he's like really wound up right now, and he's just like flying across the room. So I've been trying to like spray him with the spray bottle to calm him down, but it's just winding him up, and he's going all over. So if you see him flying across the screen, just you guys know.
If I could just add, thank you so much, Elena, for sharing that. But what I hear too is the providers like me. I think I'm the provider here, and Lori. We need to take responsibility too and make it easy for parents. I mean, I think Erin had mentioned too that a lot of parents say like, Patricia, I had these children, I had twins, I was so busy, I was up at night, I got to my pediatrician, I'm lucky if I was half awake and could, remember what my children were eating or how they were breastfeeding. So I think sometimes as providers, we need to make it easy for parents and think about all these things parents are doing and help them on our end. So thank you for sharing that, Elena. I just wanted to add that quickly.
That's a great point, because maternal, like everyone here, that's a huge topic right now, like care for mothers and paid time off and all that stuff is so horrible here. And that is a whole other conversation, obviously, but I think you're right. Like we have so much on our mind, especially as first-time parents, you don't know what the heck you're even doing. And then to have to bring that into the conversation and your hormonal and, the first time you see your doctor, the baby is only, the first time the baby sees the doctor, they're only like a couple days old. So yeah, to have to remember, and even get into that part of the conversation is like, you know,
Everybody, that's my husband. I'm trying to tell him to get off and he's
I
not.
just removed him. Oh, I'm sorry, I removed him. He's got a cat and a husband.
On the train, so I apologize. I was trying to tell him to get off.
No, I
Apologize.
just removed him. I just love that we have
Thank
special
you.
guest stars.
Sorry, honey.
Because we only have a few minutes left, Lori, is there anything that you, because you've talked to everyone privately, is there anything that you want to ask anyone or highlight as we start wrapping up?
If you don't mind, there's a couple of things I would like to highlight, and please,
course.
everyone, please jump in, because I am so honored that all of you are on this. I really am, and so touched by everything you've done. A couple of things, and if it's controversial, please just let me know and jump in, because I'm always open to hearing everything, because it takes everybody and everybody's opinion to make this happen. Like, I can't do it without that. So I did want to kind of give some information about people who don't share the information. There are multiple reasons why people don't. Some is because they're not comfortable with their journey and they don't know the words. Some is because their family isn't. Sometimes it's because their community is not, depending on their religion or their culture. So there are different reasons. I have the chills as I say that, because I think of people in their early 20s that I'm working with, and they struggle with it. So there's a multitude of reasons, but we want to be sure, I think, and be clear that there are several journeys going on here. There is the one of the parent who is trying to conceive. If there's a second parent, it is the second parent. And then there is the child who then grows up to be an adult. And this ranged true, much of what we talked about for adoption also. A lot of this not knowing. And so I don't want to leave adoption out of this, although we were focusing on donor today. Many of the feelings and many of the unknown are there. And a lot of parents who can't find the words, but then struggle, and you work with, or you talk to, or Iran maybe talks to, or Patricia maybe talks to, they start to make up a story, and they tell that story as a bedtime story to their child. When the child doesn't know what's being told, then it becomes that child's story. And sometimes that's an easy way to introduce it. With the medical record and the intake being changed, I really am so excited to be able to give you this update. I have been talking to Joe Cody. For those of you who don't know Joe, he was the co-chair of Resolve Advocacy Day, and he just blew it out of the water. He and Jesse Feist, they brought it to a whole new level, and Jen is smiling and Jay is smiling because they know him for sure. And he has been so kind as to introduce me to some of the larger electronic health records in the United States, if not the world. And I've been in conversations with them about adding this to the electronic health record. And we'll see where that goes. Some of them are saying that they have it already, so maybe it's a matter of turning it on, but the end user needs to see it. So I did want to let you know that. I think for anybody who's struggling and needs to find the words, this is a community that people can follow and reach out to. We did get some questions I saw online. I don't know if you've gotten any questions through this because I can't see that, but there was some questions about why I was involved in this, and I hope I answered that. And this is purely because of the people that I work with. I do not have biological children. I do have stepchildren, but I do not have biological children. And it just came out of a need that I saw. The purpose of this, because that was some other questions that I got online from people, is that we don't want to just help the parent who is conceiving the child, whether it be through sperm donation, egg donation, embryo donation, surrogacy, adoption. What we want to do is we want to be sure that this person who grows up and becomes an adult and at 50 years old goes to an emergency room has the capability of checking something off, whether they're donor conceived or they're adopted. So the purpose is a lifelong journey. It's just not one piece. And the study, if you don't mind me highlighting it a little bit, that she's working on, I would so encourage people to go to it. It's called the TELL study. And if they can still participate in it, it's to help support the community to understand how to find the words and tell the story to others. So I don't know if I just did it justice, but if you can look it up, it might be a wonderful thing that you may want to share, and with your own perspective of how to tell a story. So I think that was really the summation, and I thank you all so much for your openness and your willingness to participate and to share, and to help this and to help everybody feel comfortable in their own skin with their own birth story, especially the medical community, and asking the question.
And something we talk about a lot is, while we're working on this initiative, there are ways that you can advocate for yourself at the doctor and ask your doctor, have you thought about adding this to your medical
Thank
form?
you.
And even Lori on her site has letters that you can write to your local lawmakers, to the American Medical Association, to again, your own doctor's office. So you can advocate for yourself in many, many ways. And what I really love about everyone on this panel, and I swear to God, I sound like such a cornball whenever I say this, but you never know who you'll touch. There are like insignificant posts. You're like, oh, no one's reading this, no one's paying attention. But there's one person who may read it and be like, wow, thank you for sharing that. I think the more you share your own journey, what may seem like, oh, this is just a little post to me, can really mean so much to other people. And that to me is one of the reasons why I love social media, because it can be used to break stigmas and to show you are a happy family, even if it wasn't built in the typical way. So I hope everyone feels encouraged to continue sharing their stories. And again, I Dreamed of You, it really is a very cute book, I swear. I'm not just saying that, Lori, because you're thrilled. I mean, look at this. And it really supports this birth narrative, whether it's through a gestational carrier, whether it's through donor eggs, donor sperm, donor embryos. I mean, I truly, as the parent of children after, infertility, they couldn't be more wanted or worked for or anything. So I'm very proud that I've had children through IVF, because it certainly didn't stand for I'm very fertile.
Yeah, and the best part of that book, I think, is the last page, because the last page of the book ends with why you dreamed of having your child and what you went through. And so it lets you find your own words and your own story on how you can tell your story to your child.
Yes, when I dreamed of you, I knew we'd be together. Also, I have to show you, look what my son Matthew wrote in it. He wrote, I love you, mommy. Now, how cute is that? Is there anything as we wrap up that anyone would like to say to anyone who's maybe considering working with a gestational carrier or pursuing donor eggs, donor sperm, donor embryos? Is there any just words of wisdom any of you want to share as we wrap up?
I was just going to say, I really appreciate being involved in this talk, but obviously I am British, so there's other donor conceived voices out there, American donor conceived voices. So I don't speak for everybody, and I'm obviously a recipient parent as well, so I don't speak for all recipient parent voices. But yeah, there's on Instagram, there's some great discussions going on at the moment between donor conceived people and recipient parents, and it's really nice to see some constructive discussions going on, which I think is really important, because
thank you.
One of the reasons I went over to Instagram was I've been in Facebook groups for many years, and there was always kind of like them and us kind of thing. And me being in both camps, I found that quite difficult. But actually over on Instagram, I found that maybe because of the nature of that social media, with you get to see people and hear them speaking and, see their kids, it maybe comes across a bit, people can relate to it more. But there's some lots of positive discussion going on at the moment between donor conceived people and recipient parents. And it's just great to see. And I urge anyone watching this back, or if you're watching it now, to go and check those other voices out and hear what they've got to say too. So.
I have to actually thank Lena, because she has been such an advocate with this community. She has been put herself on the front line, because there has been a lot of backlash that she has received. And I am sorry to say, but not deservingly, but she has been out there listening, and I appreciate it. It opened up even more avenues for me to learn about and to hear about. But she has really, really embraced what people have to say, and
thank you.
and to make it into her own, right?
Yeah, it's definitely evolved for me, because it started off as kind of about like my journey and me becoming a parent through donor egg and IVF and all that. And now I am trying to focus more on the donor conceived person's voice, because that's really what the most important thing is of the whole process, really is what it comes down to. You know, when you're trying to pick a donor and you're deciding if you're going to go on that route and everything, you know, you're thinking about, it's hard to think about like the kid because you're so focused on yourself and you don't have the child yet. And it's not necessarily that it's selfish, but you know, you're thinking about yourself and your partner and how it's going to affect you and how you're going to tell people and how you're, you know, how am I going to handle this and how am I going to deal with this? But then you have to remember that you are creating a human being that is going to have their own story and their own roots. And it's going to be something that's considered like non-traditional. And it's going to it could bring a whole slew of things for them that you can't relate to as somebody that's not donor conceived. So like Haley, you're in a really unique position, which is awesome. But yeah, I mean, I definitely I'm trying to evolve more into talking a lot more about how important it is for the donor conceived person and using the right terms and not saying things that are maybe considered offensive or inappropriate. You know, I mean, it's a learning curve for everybody. I mean, so that's why I think it's important to be in these types of conversations, being on these panels, but being in like Facebook groups and stuff. I have a hard time some days reading some of the things that some of the donor conceived people, there's a lot of very bitter donor conceived adults that found out later in life, but there's also some that are just trying to teach us you know, the intended parents and the recipients that, you know, how important it is. And we have to hear, as hard as it is to hear some days of some of the things that they say sometimes, you know, we have to hear it and take action on it. You can't just be like, well, I'm leaving that group because I don't like what they said. You know, as hard as sometimes that is, I think those are those harder ones are the most important ones because they are the most valuable lessons. I think that us parents need to just make sure we're doing for our little people. So.
And I think it's awesome that you're doing it. You know, I've only recently come across your account as well, because like I say, I'm new to Instagram and things, but they are uncomfortable conversations. And to be honest, like I'm a recipient parent too. I was in that position, you know, and it was only actually when I DNA, although I knew I was donor conceived before we embarked on having children, I didn't really go there and I didn't DNA test. I hadn't met Jonathan. And it was only once I'd done all that, I kind of had a bit of an awakening of how I felt about things. And like, I agree, you know, slinging abuse to people online isn't going to progress the matter. You know, I think it's important that, you know, donor conceived people listen to parents listen to donor conceived people, because that's the only way we're going to move forward with this. And how nervous and like, you know, nerve-wracking it is putting my story out there. I really hope that, you know, because I am in both camps, I can kind of maybe try and help bring those sort of communities together to kind of like, because we all want the best for our children at the end of the day, don't we? And it's great, like with Patricia, the study and the thing you've got going with the TAL initiative. I just think it's fantastic. And they're all really important conversations to be having. So.
And Jennifer and Aran, do you have any words of wisdom for anyone who are looking at gestational carrier route?
I mean, yes, GoStork is a great resource to start your journey. That's why I built it, to help people to find the surrogacy agencies and surrogates and see which agency has available surrogates. So we have a lot of agencies on GoStork. All of them are vetted by GoStork, all great agencies. So if you are starting your surrogacy journey, GoStork has a lot of resources on our website. Some of them you, Jay, wrote and help us. So thank you. You're amazing. I love you. And you've been helping us so much. But seriously, there's a lot of resources in GoStork, and also my Concierge Calls. I help every intended parent. My calendar is back to back with Concierge Calls. And I feel like this is like the best job I've ever had in my life, helping other people, building their families I never wake up sad, oh, I have to go to work. I was like, I'm so excited and I'm helping, and research and education is super important on both sides, on the donor, but the parents and the support system. So, and Lori, great news about Joe Cody. Like, this is like amazing, amazing. I wanted to say it before. So thank you for that. I think this is an amazing initiative. And I really, really hope we can support you and everyone in the industry to progress that. So
I'm
one
not
day,
turning any help down. No help is being turned down. So anybody
Amazing.
listening, anybody around who wants to like
Yes,
jump
join in.
let me know.
yes,
Jennifer, any final thoughts?
I would just say for people who are looking into having a child through surrogacy or even through donor conception, it's important to put together a strong team and to not leave out any players. And that not only includes lawyers like myself or marketplaces like GhostOrg, which is a great marketplace that I've also looked on when I was going through some of the searches that I was undertaking, but also to not leave out other people that have gone through this themselves. So just, regular people on support groups on social media is a really great place to look and to just hear other voices so you don't feel alone, because some of us are in communities. I mean, I'm in New York City. It's a very large metropolitan community, but not everyone is. Some people are in small towns and in different countries and different places, and they don't know people that have gone through this. And so it's hard to feel comfortable with your situation if you don't really see the voices or hear the voices of the people around you that are mirroring your specific journey. So to look other places, social media brings us all together from different walks of life, from different countries, from different places, and you can find support groups out there. They're intended parent support groups. And I am not minimizing the fact that people like Lori and Patricia are very crucial for this part of the journey. And you really have to engage the help of mental health professionals that can help you with guiding you through your journey and talking over all of the feelings that may be coming up at various stages for all the different participants. So I'd say put together a really strong team before you engage in this, and the whole way through, really. It's really important to your mental health and to helping you find the words, like Lori said, to talk to your children who are eventually going to be adults. And I think we've all come together today because we have the same goal, which is, as somebody had said, just to really support our children and to make their lives easier. We know that in the industry, and I don't speak for the entire industry, certainly, I can speak for myself and my little part, but I would say, we have flaws and we have ways that we can improve, and having conversations like this and the open conversations help us to do that and maybe make the next generation of people who are conceived through donor reproduction or third-party reproduction through surrogacy have an easier time. And so that we don't get to situations like Haley had described, which really emphasized the real importance of having an open conversation with ourselves, with our medical professionals, with the people around us.
Yeah, thank you. And also just thank you so much. Also, just to let people know who are listening, if you go to resolve.org, or you go to ASRM, you will find listings of professionals in your area who can help, whether it be a support group or individual counseling or couples counseling. So just to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, I would encourage you to do that.
And I want to thank, everyone for making the time to talk about this and for joining us. We have several people watching us on Facebook and people who have signed in to attend. Also, this is being recorded and we're going to share it on social media as well as Lori's YouTube channel. So if you missed anything, you can watch it again there. But for now, from the bottom of my uterus, really do want to thank everyone for taking the time to talk about this. I did not build my family through donor conception, but I did use IVF. And if anyone knows me, I'm a very active infertility advocate. And again, as we started, the question sometimes isn't if you'll be a parent, it's just how. And all of these people are sharing with you their how. And when you look at their children, and you can see some of the pictures in the background, they're just as beautiful as children who are conceived through typical ways. It really isn't any less rewarding to explore different paths. So I hope people are walking away feeling comfortable and inspired in pursuing this path. And of course, advocating for it to be added to medical forms. So with that, I thank everybody and have a wonderful night. And again, if you want to get updates on the initiative, please make sure you follow Lori Metz on social media. It's at Lori Metz, LCSW. Thank you, everybody, and good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.